I'm looking at something that isn't there, yet I feel it with an intensity that rearranges my atoms. It's a color, but not like any color I've ever seen. It's not a visual wavelength, it's more like color as a feeling. It's this shimmering, vibrant emerald green, but it's also a deep, resonant indigo. And these two hues aren't separate, they're intertwined, pulsing with their own internal light. And it's all around me, not in me, but me. I can feel this light, this pure, warm honey seeping into every pore of my being. There's no separation between me and this sensation. It's like I'm being bathed, but it's not a physical bath, it's a soul bath. And there's a sound too. It's not a single sound, it's a chorus, 1,000 resonant, pure tones, all singing in perfect harmony, and it feels like they're vibrating not just in my bones, but through them, resonating with the very structure of my existence. There's a gentle, pervasive warmth that's like nothing I've ever known. It's not the warmth of the sun or a fire or another person. It's a warmth that feels like coming home, a deep, primal sense of belonging. And the emotion, oh, the emotion. It's an overwhelming, crushing sense of being seen. Not just observed, but truly, completely seen. And in that seeing, I am utterly, unequivocally accepted. There's no judgment, no expectation, just pure, unadulterated acceptance. And then, the honey light intensified, the tones surged, and with an abruptness that stole my breath, I was back, in a hospital bed. The sterile smell, the dull ache, the fluorescent lights. It was like being yanked from a symphony into a tin can. And then I was in the hospital. My name is Elena Rodriguez. I'm 38 years old. For the last 15 years, I've been a court reporter. It sounds dry, I know, transcribing the spoken word, creating a perfect, immutable record of every trial, every deposition. And I was good at it, really good. I prided myself on my accuracy, my speed, my absolute unwavering perfection. It was like a religion to me, that perfection. I was raised religious in a fairly strict household, and the idea of sin, of falling short, that was baked into my DNA. But as I got older, I drifted away. The dogma felt restrictive. And frankly, the idea of a benevolent deity who allowed so much suffering just didn't compute with the meticulous, logical mind I'd cultivated. I didn't believe in anything I couldn't touch, couldn't verify, couldn't record in pristine shorthand. My life became about precision, about irrefutable truth, about the exact word. This drive for perfection, it bled into everything. It made me difficult, I'm told, especially with family. My sister, Sophia, we used to be inseparable. But years ago, a bitter argument, something I can barely even recall the specifics of now, fractured us. It was words said, things left unsaid, a chasm that opened up and we just stopped talking. I thought about her, of course, her laugh, the way she used to hum when she was concentrating. But the estrangement was a wall I'd helped build, brick by brick, and I didn't know how to take it down. My mornings used to be a ritual of order. 5 a.m., wake up, black coffee, strong. The local news, not for the content, but for the rhythm of the announcer's voice. Then, a quick scan of the legal briefs that had landed in my inbox overnight. I'd worry about deadlines, about upcoming cases, about whether I'd caught that single, crucial syllable in a witness's testimony. It was a hum of low-grade anxiety, a constant thrum beneath the surface of my days. The week before, I remember finishing a particularly long day in court. It was a Tuesday. I walked out into the parking garage, and the air conditioning unit above my parking spot was making this bizarre rhythmic thumping noise. It was so out of sync with everything else, like a broken heartbeat. I just paused for a second, annoyed by the inefficiency of it, and then I got in my car and drove home. Just a mundane, forgettable moment. Did you have any sense, looking back, that something was coming? It's funny how the mind works. You don't see the storm gathering until you're already drenched. Looking back now, there were whispers, tiny discrepancies in the fabric of my reality that I dismissed as fatigue or stress or just the general noise of life. A few days before, I'd been at the grocery store picking up some organic kale, the usual. And this woman, a complete stranger, was fumbling with her change at the checkout, dropping coins. I just instinctively reached down, scooped them up, and handed them back to her with a quick smile. She looked at me, and for a split second, her eyes were just hollow, filled with a despair so profound it felt like a physical blow. She just mumbled a thank you and practically fled. I remember thinking, wow, she's having a rough day. That was the external sign, I guess. The internal one was a persistent feeling of being disconnected. Not sad, not anxious, just floaty. Like I was already a step removed from my own body, my own life. I'd catch myself staring out windows, not thinking about anything in particular, just observing. I'd find myself forgetting small things, like why I'd walked into a room. I thought I was just tired, you know. The job was demanding, the hours long. I told myself I needed more sleep. I'm just tired, I kept repeating, like a mantra, to ward off any deeper unease. It was the perfectionist in me, I think, refusing to acknowledge any imperfection, any crack in the armor. The date was October 17th, 2023. It was early morning, around 7:15 a.m. in Operating Room 3 at St. Jude's Hospital in Memphis. The sky outside, I'd glimpsed it through a small window as I was being prepped, was clear, a pale, washed-out blue. I was there for a routine procedure. Nothing serious, nothing to worry about. Or so I told myself. The last ordinary action I remember was holding the nurse's hand, a young woman with kind eyes, as they wheeled me into the OR. The air in the room was cool, sterile, smelling faintly of antiseptic. I could hear the low hum of machines, the clipped, professional voices of the anesthesiologist and the surgical nurse. They were talking about something, a case from the night before, I think. And then, it wasn't a gradual fading. It was a sudden, violent contraction. A searing, ice-cold pain that spread from my chest outwards, like 1,000 shards of glass exploding inside me. It was absolute terror. My body seized, a betrayal of epic proportions. I remember looking at the surgical nurse, her face contorted with concern, and the anesthesiologist leaning over me, his movements swift and urgent. And in that instant, as the pain reached its apex, as the world narrowed to a pinprick of blinding white light and that unbearable cold, I knew. This was it. The final silence before the absolute, the last sensation before the transition was a strange, profound calm washing over the terror. Like a wave, it just extinguished the fear. And then nothing. Absolute quiet. The monitors, the voices, the pain, all gone. The medical report, I was told later, said my heart had stopped for 4 minutes and 22 seconds. And then I was there. It wasn't a transition like passing through a doorway or a tunnel or a curtain. It was more like the physical world simply dissolved. One moment I was the pain, the fear, the cold, and the next I simply was somewhere else. It was as if the very concept of moving was rendered obsolete. I was just present. The shift was instantaneous, yet it felt like an eternity of being unmade and then remade. It was like trying to describe the color blue to someone who has only ever seen in black and white. Any earthly metaphor feels clumsy and insufficient. I was in a space, but it wasn't a place. It was defined by these dominant colors, these shimmering emerald and deep indigo hues that pulsed with their own internal light, as if they were alive. They weren't on a surface. They were the substance of everything. It was like being bathed in pure, warm honey, a sensation that seeped into every pore, every cell, until there was no boundary between me and this pervasive liquid warmth. It felt like coming home, a deep, resonant belonging that I had never known was missing. And the sound? Oh, the sound. It was a chorus of resonant, pure tones, incredibly complex and yet utterly harmonious, vibrating not just in my bones, but through them, like the universe itself was singing. There was a gentle, pervasive warmth that was utterly unlike any earthly temperature. It was the warmth of complete safety, of absolute acceptance. And the emotion, it was an overwhelming sense of being seen, not just observed, not analyzed, but truly, deeply, profoundly seen. And in that seeing, I was utterly and completely accepted. There was no past, no future, no judgment, just this perfect, radiant moment of acceptance. Then, in this vast expanse, a focal point emerged. It wasn't a person, not in the way I understood people. It was a presence, a being of pure consciousness. And its attention on me was like a physical touch, but one that dissolved all my defenses. It didn't speak, not with words. The communication was direct, a knowing, a downloading of information into my very soul. And the message it conveyed, the core of it, was about a moment I had completely forgotten. A fleeting memory, barely a wisp, surfaced. A time, years ago, I was waiting for a bus in the pouring rain. A young woman, maybe late teens, was sitting on the bench, sobbing uncontrollably. I had just walked over, sat down next to her, and without a word, offered her my umbrella and a tissue. She'd clutched them, mumbled something, and then I had to leave for my own bus. I'd barely thought of it since. This wasn't the perfection I'd chased. This was something else. What was the message? Can you say it out loud? The presence communicated, not in words, but in pure knowing, that the stranger at the bus stop wasn't just sad. She was on the brink, on the absolute precipice of ending her life. And my small, instinctive act of offering shelter and a tissue, an act I'd forgotten about entirely, a simple, unthinking moment of human connection, was the exact lifeline she needed to pull back from that edge. My purpose, the message made clear, wasn't in the flawless transcription, the perfect sentence, the unassailable record. It was found in these quiet, unnoticed acts of grace. It was in the moments I'd dismissed, the small kindnesses I'd never acknowledged as significant. It cracked something open inside me. The years of striving, the constant pressure to be flawless, it all felt suddenly hollow, meaningless. All that energy I'd spent on being perfect, and the truest, most impactful thing I'd ever done was a forgotten act of simple compassion. I resisted it at first, of course. The perfectionist in me, the one who craved tangible achievements, couldn't reconcile this. This was too subtle, too unassuming, but the sheer weight of the knowing, the irrefutable truth of it, settled into me. It wasn't a grand revelation about cosmic destiny. It was a deeply personal, almost embarrassing truth about my own capacity for grace. And in that moment, something shifted. A profound understanding bloomed. The most important things are often the ones we don't even notice we're doing. The pullback was jarring. It wasn't gentle. It was like being slammed against a wall, a violent, unwilling re-entry into the mundane. There was no choice, no discussion. I felt a visceral, desperate urge to stay, to linger in that state of absolute acceptance. But the memory of my sister, Sophia, a sudden, sharp pang of regret for the years of silence, for the unsaid words, it was like an anchor. The thought, I need to fix this, flashed through my mind, and that was all it took. The physical sensation of returning was excruciating. It was a rush of cold, a crushing weight, a deafening cacophony. It was like being forced back into a body that no longer fit, a suit of armor that was too heavy, too tight. The first thing I saw, through swollen, blurry eyes, was the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. The first sound was the insistent, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor, a sound that now felt like a cruel mockery of what I had experienced. Then a voice, sharp and weary, cutting through the din. Elena, Elena, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand. It was the anesthesiologist, his face etched with relief. The world felt wrong, too loud, too bright, too utterly, painfully separate. It was like all the connections, all the resonant tones had been severed, leaving me adrift in a world of sharp edges and cold surfaces. And then, a nurse, arguing with another about a patient's chart, her voice an alien, grating sound. Welcome back. I spent 3 days in the hospital after that. Sophia visited. It was awkward, stilted at first. We skirted around the edges of our shared history, the unspoken resentments hanging heavy in the sterile air. But then, looking at her, truly seeing her, the way I'd been seen, I just reached out and took her hand. I'm so sorry, Sophie, I whispered, and she just squeezed back, tears welling in her eyes. That was the beginning of the thaw. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of doctor's appointments and hushed conversations, but the internal shift was profound. A week later, I sat down at my transcription machine, the familiar keys under my fingers, and I just couldn't. The urge to create perfect records, the need for absolute accuracy, it had vanished. It felt like chasing ghosts. I quit my job that day. My colleagues thought I was insane. My supervisor, a stern woman who valued efficiency above all else, looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Elena, you're one of our best, she'd said, her voice laced with disbelief. This is a big decision. I just smiled. The biggest decision I'd ever made was to stop striving for perfection and start looking for grace. I started volunteering at a suicide prevention hotline. The first time I sat at that quiet desk, the phone in my hand, I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, but it was different this time. It was tempered with that deep, resonant sense of being seen and accepted. I knew with absolute certainty that I could listen, really listen. The lingering after effect, it's peculiar. My wristwatches, they just stop. It happens sporadically, sometimes a few times a month. I'll glance down and the second hand is frozen. always on my left wrist, the one that was closest to the nurses when they were working on me. It's like a small, tangible reminder that time, in its conventional sense, doesn't always apply. Last Tuesday, my daughter called me from college, crying about something small, a misunderstanding with a roommate. I sat down on my porch swing, the late afternoon sun warming my face, and I listened for 45 minutes. I didn't check my phone once. I didn't interrupt. I just let her talk. That's new. That's new. It's a simple thing, really. Listening. Just being present for someone else's moment of need. It's so far removed from the sterile efficiency I once revered. I used to think that the world ran on precision, on irrefutable facts, and the flawless execution of tasks. My job demanded it. My upbringing had instilled it, and I had built my entire identity around it. The idea that my purpose, my real purpose, was woven into the fabric of forgotten kindnesses, of moments I didn't even register as significant, felt like a profound, almost embarrassing correction. But it wasn't a correction in the sense of being wrong. It was a reorientation, a recalibration of what truly mattered. The profound acceptance I felt in that shimmering emerald and indigo space wasn't earned through a perfectly delivered closing argument or a flawlessly transcribed testimony. It was simply given. And in being given that acceptance, I finally understood what it meant to give it. The suicide prevention hotline isn't a glamorous job. It's quiet, it's draining, and often it's heartbreaking. But when someone pours their despair into the receiver, and I can, for a few precious minutes, just hold that space for them, offer them a steady voice in the storm, I feel a resonance that my old life never provided. It's not the grand symphony of the afterlife, but it's a melody, a quiet harmony that feels right. It feels like home, in its own way. Like I'm contributing to something that matters, not in the grand pronouncements from on high way, but in the granular, everyday way of easing another person's burden, even just a little. The first few weeks after returning were a blur of sensory overload. The world felt too sharp, too loud, too demanding. Every sound was an assault, every light a blinding glare. My body felt alien, a clumsy vessel I had to relearn how to inhabit. The fear that had been so immediate and absolute in the OR, that terror of dying, had been replaced by a new fear, the fear of living in this fractured reality, this world devoid of the resonant tones, the pervasive warmth, the absolute acceptance. I remember lying in my hospital bed, the beeping of the monitor, a constant, irritating presence, and feeling an overwhelming sense of loss. I'd been given a glimpse of something so pure, so beautiful, and now I was back in the messiness, the imperfection of human existence. I tell myself this is it. This is all there is. And the thought was crushing. My perfectionist mind, the one that had always strived for more, for better, for flawless, was struggling to reconcile this new reality. But then Sophia, her hand in mine. The awkward silence that eventually broke with her own tearful apology. That was a powerful anchor. The core message of the afterlife hadn't been about leaving this world behind, but about transforming my relationship with it. It wasn't about transcending human connection, but about deepening it. It was about recognizing the sacredness in the mundane, the profound in the ordinary. The doctors kept asking questions, of course, about my vital signs, my recovery, any lingering side effects. I'd nod, answer in monosyllables, my mind still half lingering in that other place. They attributed my state to post-operative shock, to the trauma of a near-death experience. And in a way, they were right. It was a trauma, but it was also a liberation. The biggest hurdle wasn't the physical recovery, it was the mental one. My entire framework for understanding success, for defining worth, had been shattered. I had spent decades chasing a phantom of perfection, believing that worth was earned through faultless performance. And then I was shown that the most profound act of my life was a forgotten moment of simple, uncalculated empathy. It was like discovering that the currency I'd been hoarding my whole life was worthless, and the true treasure was in the pennies I'd carelessly dropped. When I told my supervisor I was quitting, she looked at me with a mixture of pity and bewilderment. "Elena, are you sure? This is a career you've built. Years of dedication." I remember her saying that, her voice a high-pitched whine of disbelief, and for a fleeting second, a ghost of the old Elena, the one who craved validation and professional acclaim, flickered. But it was immediately extinguished by the memory of that encompassing warmth, that sense of being truly seen. I'm sure, I said, my voice calm and steady. I've built a career on recording the past. Now I want to help build a future. The transition wasn't easy. There were days of crushing self-doubt, of wondering if I'd made a colossal mistake. The income from volunteering was non-existent, and my savings, once substantial, began to dwindle. My old life, with its predictable structure and steady paycheck, seemed like a distant, almost tempting mirage. But then the phone would ring, and a voice, trembling with fear and loneliness, would pour out their heart, and I'd remember. I'd remember that quiet moment at the bus stop, the stranger's desperate face, and the echo of that profound acceptance, and I'd know I was in the right place. The wristwatches. They're still a mystery. I've tried different brands, different styles, even expensive ones. They all eventually succumb to the same fate. A sudden, inexplicable. My current one, a simple, elegant silver piece, stopped yesterday morning at precisely 10:03 a.m. I was in the middle of a particularly difficult call, the caller on the verge of giving up. I didn't even notice until I glanced down later, and there it was, frozen in time. It's not an inconvenience, not really. It's more like a secret handshake with the universe, a subtle reminder that the rules I once lived by no longer apply. My daughter, bless her, bought me a smart watch. It doesn't stop. It connects to satellites, it tracks my steps, it reminds me of appointments, but it doesn't tick. It doesn't have that tangible, visceral sense of time passing, of moments slipping away. And I miss the ticking. I miss the gentle, insistent reminder of the passage of time, even if that passage is, for me, now somewhat unconventional. The life review, or rather the focal point of it, still perplexes me. Why that moment? Why the forgotten act of kindness to a stranger on a bus stop? I'd always assumed that if I were to be reviewed, it would be for my achievements, my accolades, my meticulous work, the grand gestures, the significant milestones, not a forgotten 15-second interaction. It felt almost insulting at first, like I hadn't lived a life worthy of grand pronouncements. But the message wasn't about the grandeur of the act, but its impact. It was about the ripple effect of a single, selfless moment. The truth about that moment, the presence explained, was that the stranger was on the brink of suicide. My unsolicited kindness, that fleeting offer of comfort, was the exact lifeline they needed. It wasn't a grand gesture, it was a necessary one. And my purpose, the message made clear, was found not in perfection, but in these quiet, unnoticed acts of grace. This realization fundamentally altered my understanding of my own worth. I'd spent so long believing that my value was tied to my ability to be flawless, to never make a mistake. The court reporter's creed, accuracy above all else. But in that space of pure consciousness, I understood that the truest value lies not in the absence of flaws, but in the presence of compassion. It's in the moments we choose to extend ourselves, to offer a hand, to simply listen, even when no one is watching, even when we've forgotten we've done it. The transformation wasn't just a career change, it was a fundamental shift in my being. I used to view the world through a lens of meticulous detail, searching for inconsistencies, for errors. Now I see the interconnectedness, the subtle threads that bind us all together. I still value accuracy, but it's a different kind of accuracy. It's the accuracy of recognizing another person's pain, of understanding their unspoken needs. It's the accuracy of empathy. My relationship with Sophia has blossomed. We talk almost every day. We've shared laughter and tears, revisited old hurts with a newfound gentleness, and built a bridge across the chasm that once separated us. It turns out that the most important record I ever needed to keep wasn't etched in shorthand, but held in my heart, in the shared memories and unspoken understandings with my sister. We've discovered that forgiveness isn't about forgetting, but about choosing to move forward together. The Hospital St. Jude's, it's a place I now see with different eyes. Not as a place of sterile procedure and cold efficiency, but as a place where life, in all its fragile complexity, is held. The morning sky, that clear, pale blue I glimpsed before, I see it differently now. It's not just a meteorological observation. It's a reminder of the vastness, of the possibilities, of the constant, gentle unfolding of the universe. There are still days, of course, when the old anxieties whisper, when the pressure to be something, to achieve something tangible, tries to creep back in. I'll catch myself mentally cataloging a conversation, dissecting my own responses, searching for areas where I could have been more articulate, more precise. But then I'll feel that faint, almost imperceptible warmth, that sense of being seen, and the whispers fade. They're just echoes of a past life, a life I've outgrown. The core message, the truth about that moment at the bus stop, it's not a secret I keep locked away. It's something I try to embody. The stranger on the brink of suicide, that's not just a story from my past. It's a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the immense power of even the smallest act of human connection. My purpose, found not in perfection, but in these quiet, unnoticed acts of grace. That's the anthem of my new existence. I remember the anesthesiologist's face when I finally woke up properly, the look of profound relief. He thought he'd lost me, and for a moment he almost had. But in that loss, something else was found. A deeper understanding of what it means to be alive, to be connected, to be human. The quiet hum of the machines, the sterile smell, the dull ache, they're all part of this existence. And now, I can navigate them without the crushing weight of perfectionism, without the desperate need to control every variable. I can simply be. My daughter is applying to law school now. She's pursuing a career that demands precision and rigor, and I encourage her, I support her, but I also remind her gently of the importance of the human element. Remember why you're doing it, Maya, I tell her. Not just for the accolades, but for the people you'll serve. She looks at me, and I see a flicker of understanding in her eyes, a nascent recognition of what I've come to know. Perhaps one day she'll have her own moment, her own forgotten kindness that reveals a deeper truth. The stray cat that sometimes visits my porch, I leave out food for it, clean water. It's skittish, always has been, but it's getting bolder. It's not a grand gesture, it's not going to change the world, but it's a small act of care, a quiet acknowledgement of another living being. And that, I've learned, is where true purpose resides. It's in the stitching together of these small moments of grace, these quiet affirmations of connection, that the fabric of a meaningful life is truly woven. The perfectionist in me is gone, replaced by a quiet appreciation for the imperfect, the messy, the beautifully human. And for the first time, I feel truly, completely at peace. My wristwatches may stop, but the time I have now feels infinite. And for the first time, I feel truly, completely at peace. My wristwatches may stop, but the time I have now feels infinite. It's a strange paradox, isn't it? Time itself, the very construct I used to meticulously track, to impose order upon, now seems to elude my grasp in a peculiar, physical way. Yet in my internal experience, it stretches out, boundless and rich with possibility. The ticking of a clock, once a constant, reassuring rhythm of my days, has become a distant memory, replaced by a different kind of awareness, a more fluid understanding of presence. The fact that my watches cease to function on my left wrist, the one closest to the sterile efficiency of the operating room, feels less like a glitch and more like a quiet recalibration. It's as if that precise moment of transition, that brief flicker outside of linear time, imprinted itself onto my physical being, leaving a subtle, indelible mark. I remember explaining it to my daughter, Maya, when she noticed my third watch in as many months had simply died. She's 20 now, a driven young woman with a mind as sharp as any legal brief I ever transcribed. She's heading to law school, and I see in her the same meticulous attention to detail, the same drive for excellence that I once embodied. But I also see something else, something I hope she'll embrace more readily than I did in my younger years, a deep wellspring of empathy. "Mom," she'd said, her brow furrowed with concern, holding up the silent timepiece. "This is the third one. Are you sure you're not just losing them?" I'd smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that felt more natural than anything I'd experienced in my court reporting days. "No, Maya, I'm not losing them. They just stop." She'd tilted her head, a hint of my old perfectionist confusion in her expression. "But why? Is there something wrong with your circulation? Maybe you're allergic to the metal?" And in that moment, I saw the opportunity. Not to impress her with an explanation of an afterlife experience she wouldn't understand, but to impart a lesson, a truth I'd only recently learned myself. "It's not about circulation, honey," I'd said, gently taking the watch from her. "It's about perspective. Sometimes time just stops for us in certain places or in certain moments, and then it starts again, but differently. It's a reminder that not everything in life operates on the same clock. She'd looked at me, a little bewildered, but I could see a seed of curiosity planted. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The essence of it was already present in the life I was now living, in the choices I was making. The decision to volunteer at the suicide prevention hotline hadn't been born from a sudden, dramatic revelation, but from a slow, steady unfolding of understanding. It was a natural progression from that moment in the shimmering indigo and emerald expanse, that overwhelming sense of being seen and accepted. The initial days back in the physical realm were a jarring re-entry. The world, once a carefully ordered landscape of facts and figures, now felt chaotic, almost overwhelming. The sheer volume of sensory input was staggering. The cacophony of city sounds, the blare of horns, the rumble of traffic, the shrill cries of gulls near the harbor, all assaulted my senses with a ferocity I hadn't anticipated. My meticulously organized mind, accustomed to filtering and categorizing, struggled to cope. It was like trying to download an entire library onto a single, overwhelmed processor. And the emotions. Oh, the emotions. In the afterlife, there was only that pure, resonant acceptance. Here, the spectrum was vast, complex, and often deeply unsettling. I'd find myself weeping without cause, overwhelmed by a wave of sorrow for all the pain I'd witnessed in my life, both professionally and personally. Then, just as quickly, a surge of unadulterated joy would flood me, an appreciation for the simple beauty of a sunbeam hitting a dusty window pane, or the gentle warmth of my cat's purr as it curled up on my lap. This emotional fluidity was, in itself, a profound transformation. My previous existence had been characterized by a tightly controlled emotional landscape, a deliberate suppression of anything that might compromise my professional demeanor. Now, I felt everything, intensely and without shame. My sister, Sophia, she was, and still is, a constant source of grounding. When I first saw her in the hospital room, her face etched with worry and a flicker of something I recognized as fear, I knew that a significant part of my healing had already begun. The argument that had driven us apart for so many years felt, in retrospect, like a petty squabble blown out of proportion by ego and pride. The years of silence had created a chasm, a void filled with assumptions and unspoken resentments. But in that hospital room, holding her hand, a quiet understanding passed between us. The memory of that shared childhood, of laughter and secrets whispered in the dark, resurfaced with a clarity that dissolved years of animosity. "I'm so sorry, Sophie," I'd whispered, my voice raw. "For everything." Her eyes welled up and she squeezed my hand, her own tears mirroring mine. "Me too, Elena. Me too." That was the beginning. We started small, with hesitant phone calls and brief visits. Then came longer conversations, sharing memories, acknowledging the hurt, and slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding our fractured relationship. She became my confidant, my anchor in this new, often bewildering reality. She'd listen patiently as I tried to articulate the ineffable, the sensations and truths I'd experienced. She wouldn't always understand, not in the way I longed for her to, but she always listened. And that, I've learned, is often more than enough. The transition from court reporter to volunteer counselor wasn't a direct leap. There were months of reorientation, of learning to listen not for misspoken words or legal technicalities, but for the raw vulnerability beneath the surface. The suicide prevention hotline became my sanctuary, a place where the fragmented pieces of my experience began to cohere. The sterile anonymity of a phone call provided a safe distance, allowing me to offer support without the burden of my own judgments or expectations. I remember my first call. The dial tone seemed impossibly loud, the silence before the ring deafening. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that felt like a discordant echo of my near-death experience. Then, a voice, barely a whisper, crackled through the receiver. A young man, his words laced with despair, spoke of an unbearable loneliness, of a world that seemed to offer no solace. My first instinct, the old Elena, was to strategize, to find the right words, the perfect phrase that would somehow fix his pain. But then, the memory of that encompassing warmth, of that absolute acceptance, washed over me. I didn't have the perfect words. I didn't need them. All I had was the ability to be present, to bear witness to his suffering without flinching, without trying to impose my own narrative. I hear you, I said, my voice calm, steady. It sounds incredibly difficult. I'm here to listen. And he talked. He poured out his fears, his regrets, the weight of a life that felt too heavy to carry. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer solutions. I simply listened. And as he spoke, I felt a profound shift within myself. The anxiety receded, replaced by a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose that resonated deeper than any professional achievement ever had. When the call ended, he thanked me, his voice a little stronger, a little less fraught with despair. And in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The profound understanding that bloomed within me, the revelation that my worth wasn't measured by my perfection, but by my capacity for compassion, was a slow burn. It wasn't a sudden, blinding flash, but a gradual dawning. I began to see the world not as a series of challenges to be conquered, but as a tapestry of interconnected experiences, each thread valuable in its own right. The meticulous nature of my former profession, the relentless pursuit of accuracy, had honed my observational skills, but it had also created a certain detachment. Now those same skills were being repurposed. I could observe the subtle cues in a caller's voice, the unspoken anxieties that lay beneath their words, the quiet desperation that clung to their every syllable. This recalibration wasn't without its challenges. There were days when the weight of human suffering felt immense, when the sheer volume of pain I encountered threatened to overwhelm me. I'd retreat, seek solace in the quiet companionship of my cat, or spend hours lost in conversation with Sophia. But I never considered returning to my old life. The thought of transcribing the mundane machinations of the legal system, of chasing an ever-elusive standard of perfection, felt not only unfulfilling, but also deeply, profoundly wrong. My priorities had shifted, irrevocably. The core message, the truth about that moment at the bus stop, continued to resonate, morphing and deepening with each passing day. It wasn't just about the stranger's suicide attempt. It was about the universal human need for connection, for validation, for a simple act of kindness in a world that often feels indifferent. I realized that the stranger, in their desperation, was a reflection of a deeper human condition, a condition I had, in my own way, grappled with for years. My pursuit of perfection had been a shield, a way to deflect any perceived vulnerability, any hint of imperfection. But that shield, I now understood, had also kept me from truly connecting with others and with myself. The memory of the operating room, the searing cold, the loss of consciousness, it doesn't haunt me. Instead, it's a quiet reminder, a touchstone. It's the moment I was stripped bare, devoid of my carefully constructed identity, and found something far more fundamental. It's the moment I understood that the most profound truths are often found not in the loud pronouncements of achievement, but in the quiet whispers of the soul. My relationship with my daughter Maya has also deepened. She's no longer just the recipient of my perfect advice, but a participant in a mutual exchange of understanding. She sees the peace that has settled upon me, the genuine contentment that emanates from my new path. She might not fully grasp the mystical elements of my experience, but she understands the essence of it. That a life lived in service to others, a life dedicated to compassion, is a life of profound meaning. She's starting her own journey, her own path towards her own truths, and I'm so proud to witness it. I encourage her to question, to explore, to find her own moments of grace, even if they are found in the sterile precision of the legal world. For even there, in the pursuit of justice, lies the opportunity for compassion. The stray cat that visits my porch has become a regular fixture. It no longer flinches when I approach, sometimes even allowing me to stroke its sleek, dark fur. It's a small victory, a testament to patience and gentle persistence. It's a reminder that trust can be earned, that fear can be overcome, and that even the most solitary beings can find comfort in a moment of unexpected kindness. I leave out fresh water and a small bowl of kibble each morning, a silent offering of care. It's not a grand gesture, not an act that will be recorded in history books, but it's an act that matters. It's a small stitch in the vast tapestry of connection that I now strive to weave. The lingering after effect of the stopped watches. It's a constant whisper of the extraordinary in the ordinary. I've learned to accept it, to see it not as a defect, but as a symbol of my own transcendence of conventional time, of my ability to exist in a way outside of its rigid constraints. It's a reminder that while the world may measure life in seconds, minutes, and hours, its true value lies in the depth of our experiences, the quality of our connections, and the indelible mark of grace we leave on the lives of others. My old life was measured by the tick-tock of the clock. My new life is measured by the moments I truly live, by the connections I forge, and by the quiet, unseen acts of kindness that ripple outwards, touching lives in ways I may never fully comprehend. And that, more than anything, feels like time well spent. And that, more than anything, feels like time well spent. It's a profound shift from the relentless pursuit of an unattainable ideal, a constant striving for an impossible perfection that once defined me. That striving, I now understand, was a form of self-imprisonment, a cage built from the fear of judgment, the dread of inadequacy. The years spent meticulously crafting irrefutable records, the perfect sentences, the unflinching accuracy, it was all an elaborate defense mechanism against the messy, unpredictable reality of human existence. The afterlife experience, in its shimmering, resonant embrace, didn't erase that drive for accuracy entirely. Instead, it reframed it. It taught me that the most important accuracy lies not in the precision of a dictated word, but in the precise recognition of another's pain. It's the accuracy of empathy, the unerring ability to sense the unspoken needs, the quiet desperation that lies beneath the surface of everyday conversation. The skills I honed as a court reporter, observation, attention to detail, the ability to sift through complex information, they're still valuable. But now, they're applied to a different kind of transcript. One written not in ink and paper, but in the sighs, the hesitations, and the quiet confessions of souls in distress. My relationship with Sophia has become a testament to this new understanding. The chasm that once separated us, built from years of pride and stubbornness, has been filled, not with grand pronouncements or elaborate apologies, but with shared silences, gentle laughter, and the quiet acknowledgement of shared humanity. We've learned to listen to each other, not for ammunition, but for understanding. We've discovered that forgiveness isn't about forgetting, but about choosing to move forward, hand in hand, towards a shared present and a more hopeful future. Her own journey, I see, is also unfolding, marked by her own quiet discoveries and her growing capacity for compassion. The quiet hum of the suicide prevention hotline is my new symphony. It's not the grand, resonant chorus of the afterlife, but it's a melody, a gentle harmony that resonates with a profound sense of rightness. When a caller pours their despair into the receiver, and I can, for a few precious moments, hold that space for them, offer them a steady voice in their storm, I feel a connection, a purpose that transcends any professional accolade I ever received. It's in these small, often unseen acts of grace that I find my true north. It's here, in the granular, everyday work of easing another person's burden, that I truly feel I am living.